He was fragile, sensitive, thin-skinned. And the best metaphor of his life is a man standing in the hallway with his life in his hands as with a big and useless gift which he doesn't really know what to do with and where to put. Hello and welcome, my friends, to Read Less, a channel of letters where we talk about literature and more. My name is Armen Zakharyan, and today we will meet Franz Kafka, a man who lived as if apologizing for his own presence, whispering through the walls of the 20th century with the voice of someone who had already seen what was coming. He wrote in German, lived in Prague, was of Jewish origins, and truly belonged nowhere. His novels became some of the most influential and prophetic in the history of literature, not because Kafka predicted specific events, but because he captured the emotional blueprint of the century before it unfolded. The trial, the castle, the metamorphosis, these are not just stories, these are emotional landscapes. He didn't write about fascism, but he showed us how a man might feel waking up under its weight. That's why reading him today doesn't feel like reading the past. It feels like finally finding words for something you've always known but never said aloud. And today we're stepping into The Trial, one of Kafka's most brilliant texts, and perhaps the fullest version of his talent. But before we proceed, we must first complete a small but essential formality. Please confirm your continued participation by pressing like and subscribing to this channel. Your cooperation will be duly noted and greatly appreciated by the Department of Literary Affairs. Thank you, and let's begin. The plot of The Trial at first sight seems simple. A man is arrested but not told why. He tries to defend himself, but there is no clear accusation. He searches for justice, but the system is shapeless and endless. So he's losing himself in those attempts of finding solution or salvation. But beneath that plot is the power of Kafka's prose, the incredible sense of absurdity that seeps through every sentence. Let's begin with the very first scene of the novel and try to understand how Kafka creates this unique atmosphere. A bank clerk, Joseph K., who must have been slandered by someone because it seems as if he has done nothing wrong, is arrested. A plot twist which, at a structural level outside Kafka's prose, in the vast majority of cases would mean some kind of rapid change in the life of the protagonist. But Kafka not only does not increase the dynamics of this beginning, but on the contrary, he takes a step forward and then 3 steps back. There's no tension, no chase, no moment of realization. Instead, everything feels half real, half bureaucratic. The inspector informs K that he has been arrested. And this is a significant change, but it, of course, does not change anything at all. And K has to go to the bank where he works. And K, on the one hand, refuses to recognize his authority over him, but on the other, for some reason, begins to obey. This contradiction, being both guilty and innocent, both free and trapped, is what gives the scene its power. From the very beginning, Kafka shows us that the real prison is not the one built by the court. It's the one we build inside ourselves, trying to make sense of what makes no sense at all. In another scene, K rushes to his first session. But wait a minute, why is he in a hurry? He was not assigned a certain time. He himself decided to go to 9, so he should not rush. Okay, then he will not. By the way, it will be even better if he comes late. He doesn't want to humiliate himself with too much punctuality before the court. And can you guess what does he do, having decided so? Of course, for some reason, he switches to running. In the same scene, there is a beautiful detail which, as it seems to me, is an excellent metaphor for the whole text. K believes that he will recognize the courthouse from afar by some sign, but he has no idea which sign it could be. This is a wonderful example of Kafkaesque absurdity, so subtle and realistic that in another text you can't even take it for an absurdity. Moreover, this detail is a part of the study of the relationship between man and power, which Kafka undertakes in the trial. At the very beginning, the guardian tells K a harsh formula: guilt itself attracts justice. K refuses to believe it. And still, our K, slandered K, innocent K, still self-confident K, thinks for some reason that he will recognize the courthouse, although he has nothing to recognize it with except for guilt. And Kafka does this all the time. The stove in the room is not heated, but inside is terribly hot and stuffy. On the one hand, it's a contradiction, another brick of the absurd, but on the other hand, it's a metaphor for official government offices, where there is not even a glimmer of hope, but is very stuffy, just like in a coffin. Or take the court, which is located in the attic. Kafka creates a frightening and absurd construction out of completely neutral elements. The court and the attic are just a court and an attic by themselves, but if you put them together and place the court in the attic, between playing children and drying laundry, then the routine of this phenomena completely dissolves into the absurdity of their combination. And at the same time, this construction is meaningful because, as a matter of fact, where else the court should be, if not at the very top, above stairs, living quarters and taverns? The court is the ultimate power, the sentencing authority. For sure, it must supervise people from above, but people also need to dry their laundry somewhere. And of course, there's the most paradoxical element of the structure that Kafka creates in the book. The trial of Joseph K. becomes the central concern of his life. Literally everyone talks with him about the trial, from the landlady and uncle to the chaplain in the cathedral. There is always some kind of activity going on in the process. Petitions are being drawn up, inquiries are being made, interrogations are being conducted, and at the same time, no one knows what, in fact, K is accused of. Finally, the peak of all this Kafkaesque absurdity is a grotesque theatrical scene of the execution when two men, who look like, what a stunning detail, retired actors, take K for some reason to an abandoned quarry at night. And then comes the most chilling detail. K is laid down with his head on a stone meant for the execution. But the neck is not placed quite right. He lies crooked. They shift him again. Still not better. In fact, he was lying better the first time. Kafka describes all of it calmly, as if he were writing not about a man's neck on a stone, but about a head resting on a pillow before sleep. And in this calmness lies the true horror, the defenselessness, the quiet acceptance of a punishment delivered by a law no one has ever read for a crime no one knows. Obviously, such a complex and deep work was doomed to give rise to many different interpretations. Some people believe the trial is autobiographical and point to parallels with Kafka's own life. Others say the book is prophetic. They see Kafka as a visionary. He dies in 1924 and still he seems to predict the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. These systems are cruel, cold, and operate with bizarre bureaucratic laws. Another group reads it as a satire on the slow and clumsy bureaucracy of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Still others think it's a metaphysical novel. In this reading, guilt is not legal but existential. The trial is not about the system but about human fate. The court symbolizes destiny impossible to fight. There is also a surprising view. Some see K's death as liberation. The endless legal process destroys dignity. A minor character, Block, is shown as a broken man who serves his lawyer like a dog. And K refuses to live like this. His death ends the game. it's his way out. All these readings can coexist. The trial holds many layers. It is personal, political, philosophical. And Kafka himself seemed to understand that people would read the novel in many different ways. The characters of his book often debate meanings. The most famous example is how the prison chaplain and Kay discuss the parable about the doorkeeper. I will remind you this parable. There is a doorkeeper at the doors of the law. A man from the countryside comes to the doorkeeper and asks to let him go through to the law. But the gatekeeper says that he cannot let him go through now. The man from the countryside tries at least to look into the bowels of the law, to which the doorkeeper laughs and says, "If you're so tempted, give it a try. Try and go in, even though I say you can't. Careful though, I am powerful, and I'm only the lowliest of all the doormen. There are doorkeepers for each of the rooms, and each of them is more powerful than the previous. It's more than I can stand just to look at the third one." The man from the countryside was surprised, for he had supposed that the path to the law should be open to everyone and at any hour. But nonetheless, he decided to wait and sat down on a bench. And then years go by, and he keeps trying to persuade the doorkeeper to let him pass. He gives him all the most valuable things he has, but the doorkeeper, accepting, says, "I'll only accept this so that you don't think there's anything you failed to do," and repeats again and again that he can't let him come in. Yet, over many years, his eyes grow dim. He doesn't have long to live now, and he asks the gatekeeper his last question. Everyone wants access to the law. How come over all these years no one but me has asked to be let in? The doorkeeper can see the man's life has come to an end, and so he shouts to him, "Nobody else could have got in this way, as this entrance was meant only for you. Now I'll go and close it." This parable, of course, has spawned many interpretations, and Kafka himself laid down that tradition, passing on some of them in a conversation between Kay and the chaplain. I don't want to get too carried away with this game, but here's what I want to draw your attention to. This parable begins with a trick. When we say that a man from the countryside comes to the door of the law and the doorkeeper does not let him in, this is only partly true, because the man from the countryside does not come to the law. He comes to the doorkeeper. A tiny but very important detail which, fortunately, was not lost in translation. A man from the countryside comes up to the doorkeeper and asks for entry. And this man, frightened by the doorkeeper's answers, directs all his strength not to enter. After all, the doorkeeper does not even stop him, but to persuade the doorkeeper to allow him to enter. The man from the countryside gets involved with this doorkeeper in a whole death-long game. He does not go to the law, but starts his own trial, with petitions and solicitations, bribes and waiting. And as the old proverb says, whoever allows the trial loses it. Perhaps the man from the countryside should not have waited, but should have gone through. After all, he himself says access to the law should be open at all times and for everyone. But for the court, no matter what it symbolizes, totalitarianism or power or fate, for this dreadful Kafkaesque court, which seems to be on guard of the law, there is nothing more important than convincing everyone who falls into its gears that the only right thing to do is never to try to pass to the law, but to reconcile with the existing order of things. This court is not interested in justice, but in the procedure. This court does not embody, but obscures the law. And the gatekeeper guards not the law, but the gate. The chaplain says to Kay, the court doesn't want anything from you. It accepts you when you come, and it lets you go when you leave. But this is only partially true. The court still needs something from you to convince you that it is so powerful that it's useless to resist. And here, it seems to me, one of the main questions of the trial arises: whether the power of the court is really based on the law and is as limitless as they say about it in reception rooms and attics. Is it really inevitable? And the very idea of resistance a ridiculous delusion? Or is the power of the court based not on the law but on fear, and unsupported by anything but paperwork and rumors? Arresting on one inspector and 2 executioners can be resisted. Kafka once answered this question in his diary. "If I'm doomed," he wrote, "then I'm doomed not only to death, but also to resistance until death." However, later he changed this formula as many times as he returned to it. Endless swings of hopes and disappointments, despair and resistance. That is life. So every time, finding ourselves in this room in the morning, having done nothing wrong but being arrested and being brought before a court that has so many different incarnations in our life, every time we have to answer this question anew. Thank you for being with us today. If you want more stories like this one, please stay and support our channel. Like this video and share it with your friends who love literature as much as you do. And next time, perhaps, we'll meet not in the courtroom, but in the library, where the door is always open. And until then, call me Armin, and I'll see you next time.